What's good, ladies and gents? Welcome back to MKO Boxing, aka MKO Pugilism, where we talk all things box. Remember to like and subscribe on YouTube, follow on TikTok, all that good stuff. So let's get into it. So now we're dealing with the Thursday of fight week. It's well and truly underway. Press conference going on now as we speak, and I'm just going to give some major thoughts and my sort of prediction and a bit of a breakdown on how I think the fight goes and who I think wins. So during this process, the whole lead up and everything, there's a lot of people pulling for Conor Benn, not liking the attitude of Chris Eubank Jr., seeing him as sort of the arrogant guy. It's quite reminiscent of his old man, of the dad, Eubank Sr. He also split opinion down the middle. A lot of people didn't like him because of his cockiness, his attitude, his confidence. And with the son, in some ways, it's the same sort of thing. And Conor Benn, a lot of people don't like him as well. I mean, he's obviously, you had the PED situation, so there's people sort of pulling for both sides. Some people want to see Ben get turned over, get beat. Some want to see Eubank get beat, and I think that's what makes this fight sell. And of course, this has a sort of 35-year legacy from going back to when their fathers fought. And I can remember those fights. I mean, I was just a very young kid at the time, but I can remember it. It was huge. It was sort of all over the newspapers, the TV. There's a lot fewer TV channels, none of this streaming and stuff. So there was so much focus and so much emphasis on when their fathers fought. But anyway, let's get into their fight. So for me, personally, I'll tell you straight up that I'm picking Chris Eubank Jr. to win this fight on points. And my reasoning for this is that of the two of these guys, Chris Eubank Jr. is sort of the more proven quantity. So whereas Conor Benn, they say he's a welterweight. His last two have been at around 154, sort of light middleweight, super welterweight. He hasn't looked powerful up at light middleweight. He hasn't looked devastating up there. He's looked sort of average. He's hit these guys with clean shots up there at sort of light middle, and he didn't really look to have the power to take anyone out. So he didn't look anywhere near as devastating as he did again in some of his welterweight fights, like against Van Heerden and against Chris Algieri. There may be question marks over those performances because of obviously the violations, but he didn't fail at that time, so we don't know. But he looked quite devastating in at welterweight in some of those performances, but north of welterweight at 154, the fact of the matter is we haven't really seen any of this devastating power from Conor Benn. We haven't really seen any great performances from Conor Benn north of welterweight. So going on that data, as much as they're saying, he's beating up William Scarlin sparring, and if he is, then that's impressive, and he's giving Denzel Bentley all he can handle, and Denzel Bentley is a good fighter, and then another guy that beat up Munguia, according to Nigel Benn. So he's been giving guys a handful in the gym, but as far as what we've seen in actual fights, we haven't seen anything impressive from Conor Benn anywhere north of welterweight. So that's something we have to take into consideration. Chris Eubank Jr., throughout his career, he's been a sort of career middleweight. He's failed at the highest level. He's come up short against guys like George Groves, Billy Joe Saunders, and he had the surprise upset loss against Liam Beefy Smith. But in Chris Eubank Jr.'s defense, you could say that, well, Billy Joe Saunders went on to become world champion, became British champion at the time. George Groves was obviously world champion at the time, and Liam Beefy Smith was also former world champion at the time when they fought. So he's lost to the sort of high world-class level of fighters. That's where he's fallen short. So he's been to the top level, fought top level guys as a super middleweight, and as a middleweight. He's come up short there. Yes, he's beat James DeGale when he won the IBO trinket, but so he's kind of failed at the top level of middleweight. But we know, at least with Chris Eubank Jr., he's been to that top level, he's been competitive there, and he's just fallen short there. So he's been to the top level. Conor Benn, what we know of him, he's been decent at welterweight, not fought the top welterweights. And, you know, so we don't know what would happen if he goes in against the top welterweights. I mean, for me, for my money, if he goes in there with a Boots Ennis or any of the top welterweights, he loses. But so far, he's undefeated, but also unproven at the top level. Chris Eubank Jr. is a guy that we know he's been to the top level. He has failed at times, but we know he's been there. He can hang there. He can survive there. Also, Chris Eubank Jr., he's the bigger guy. He has hand speed. I think CONORBENN's going to be the quicker guy in there. But for me, Chris Eubank Jr. is the one I'm picking because he, again, in the category of experience at world level, there's no competition. It's night and day. Chris Eubank Jr. has got bags of experience at the top level, and he knows what it takes up there. He's been there. He's done it. Whereas Conor Benn is still an unproven, untested quantity. He's basically he's up there in the rankings, but he's a prospect. He's yet to prove himself or compete at top level in his own weight division. So those are really the reasons, just very simply for me, that Chris Eubank Jr., he's got more experience. He's been in there with top guys. He's the sort of, as much as he's not elite at middle, you know, he's sort of up there, but he's not quite elite. He's never been proper world champion, but we know that he's up there, he's there or thereabouts. But Conor Benn has not been tested at the top level at welterweight, and in his performances at like middleweight, the division below, or super welterweight, he hasn't looked impressive. He hasn't looked to have any devastating power. So for me, based on those factors, I've got to favor Chris Eubank Jr. going into this one, and I favor him to do the job on points, because for me, he's the man that's sort of been there. And Conor Benn, he looks to sort of, you know, as I said, him going up in weight again to 160. Yes, of the two of them, I suppose he's going to be the more comfortable man. He's the man that's going to be sort of he's going to be able to take in all the food and everything, so he's going to be able to make the weight very, very easily and comfortably, and that's where he's going to have the advantage, because Eubank Jr., there is that rehydration clause, and Eubank's got to be very, very careful with that. And I think that is where Eubank Jr. could come unstuck. That's where Conor Benn has his chance, that if Eubank Jr. hasn't done the weight properly, or he hasn't rehydrated him properly, then Conor Benn definitely has a good chance. And there's also the chance that maybe Eubank Jr. gets caught with a shot by surprise and gets hurt and then can't recover. That there's a chance of that. But I'm saying, for me, the most likely outcome is Chris Eubank Jr. takes this one, and I'm calling it by most likely by points, because now Chris Eubank Jr. kind of lays back and he doesn't always go for the finish. So I'm thinking this most likely happens by points, but it could be a late stoppage. But I'm definitely thinking this fight goes long. I don't think it's going to be over early. I think it's going to go quite a long while. It's going to probably go to points, and Chris Eubank wins for me. But let me know your thoughts. Who do you have winning this fight in the comment section? Until next time, MKO Boxing, over and out.